Hello and welcome to The Big Fight. How can we clean up Indian politics? That's a question many people have been asking for several months now, as there seems to be a nationwide movement against corruption. And this week, of course, we've seen some of the highest profile victims, if you like. Well, I'm not sure whether victims is the right way to describe them. They are certainly some of the biggest targets of the anti-corruption campaign so far. They have been named, they have been identified. The country really has been questioning the political system and saying, how can we clean up the political system? And joining us today on The Big Fight, we have a range of people who've come up with really innovative solutions and suggestions on how the political system can be cleaned up. We've been hearing a lot about the Jan Lokpal draft. That's one of the methods. There are other ideas out there as well, and we're going to be hearing some of them. I'd like to introduce our panel. I'd like to start by welcoming Dr. J.J. Rani, Director at Tata Sons, one of the people who's been leading a certain campaign there on how corporates can get involved in this. Mr. N. Gopalaswamy, former Chief Election Commissioner of India. Sir, it gives us great pleasure to welcome you. Thank you so much. And also Swami Agnivesh, who's been very closely associated with the Jan Lokpal Bill movement. Here in the studio, Manish Tiwari and Nirmala Sitharaman. I suspect both of you, instead of arguing against each other, might be defending politicians and politics to some extent during this program. But we'll see how that pans out as we go ahead. Yogendra Yadav of the CSDS, it's great to have you with us, Yogendra, here on the program. Dr. Jagdeep Chokar, founder member of the Association of Democratic Reforms, it's great to have you with us. Sri Vatsa Krishna is from the IAS, but he's on leave. He's here in his personal capacity. And Mr. Jayaprakash Narayan, National Coordinator of the Lok Satta movement. Thank you all so much for being with us. I want to first start off by asking you, when we say that there's a problem that we face with corruption, is it correct to say it is primarily a political problem and that politics need to be cleaned up and politicians in particular are to be blamed for this? Who's going to have the first shot at that? Yogendra, why don't I get you to start this off?
You could say cleaning up politics is necessary to cleaning up rest of corruption, but to say that corruption lies only and primarily in politics is completely mistaken.
Okay, Mr. Gopalaswamy, you've watched the political system very closely. Do you think politics and politicians are the fountainhead of corruption in India?
I don't agree that the corruption resides only in that particular part of the system. No. I think a lot more also resides in the entire governing system. Therefore, it's incorrect to say that the politicians are the fountainheads of corruption. I think, yes, being in positions of power and being in positions where they can make a change, to the extent that they have not made a change, one could say that they might have failed in their duties. But I don't think they are the only part of the citizenry who needs to be blamed for this purpose.
Manish Tiwari, the national mood of euphoria, joy almost, when you see somebody like Suresh Kalmadi being arrested by the CBI, when you see Mr. Raja in prison, the nation has almost loved to hate politicians. What do you think is the reason for that?
There is a mood of cynicism, which prevails about politics per se, and that is not only which is peculiar to India. In fact, if you really look at it in a global context, there is a certain amount of cynicism which people have about their politicians, but that is particularly because of the fact that they own their politicians. They feel that, yes, here are people who we've elected and sent, and they've either betrayed our trust or they've kept our trust. So to that extent, if people, have an angst against politicians, I would not say that angst is misdirected.
Okay, Nirmala?
The politician is the one who's very close to the power center, the decision-making place. He's there empowered to take care of people's interest. So the angst that which comes over, particularly now in the recent days, outpouring being shown in the public domain is understandable. And because the expectations on politicians from the public is very high, that we expect them to also be accountable. And every now and then, in spite of elections happening and people going and taking their mandate from the people, as it were, still nothing has been there visible for them to see as cleaning the system up. As a result, the anger is far more.
Srivatsa, there are people who would say that bureaucrats are, if anything, more corrupt on sometimes, and especially when you go down to the grassroots. It's quite often your local petty official, your local babu, your local police wala, who is actually as corrupt and affects people as much as the politician does.
There's a political executive and there's a permanent
In
executive.
other words, you're to blame.
And, well, I think I'm not here to say that any one of them come from a different part of society. They all come from the same sections of society. And there's no gainsaying the fact that just as you have good IAS officers, you have bad IAS officers. Just as you have good politicians, you have many bad politicians too. Having said that, I think one should make a distinction. There's a vast army of a lower bureaucracy, which often indulges in petty corruption of the kind you spoke about. Sitting on top of that vast army is not such a vast army of very educated, very qualified civil servants who do their best in very difficult circumstances. Okay. So I think there is a distinction which needs to be made rather than tar everyone with one brush.
Okay, Swami Agnivesh, the entire movement that we have seen for the Jan Lokpal Bill, and it's actually been overtaken a little bit by subsequent events and specific people have taken center stage. There are some people, Swami Agnivesh, and I want to put this to you directly, that the bill almost is directing the anger which people feel against politicians to almost trying to scrap democracy itself, to set up a dictatorial power center which will sit over and above politicians. And there are people who feel that that is a dangerous trend. What is your response to that?
विक्रम जी, पहले मैं ये बताना चाहूँगा कि भ्रष्टाचार जो है, करप्शन, वो ऊपर से नीचे की तरफ आता है. जैसे पानी बहता है ऊपर से नीचे, इसी तरह से भ्रष्टाचार की भी यही गति है. नीचे से ऊपर नहीं जाता, ऊपर से नीचे आता है. तो ऊपर कौन लोग हैं? जैसे अभी सीतारामन जी ने कहा कि जो लोग पावर में हैं, डिसीजन मेकिंग अथॉरिटी में हैं, वही लोग सबसे ज़्यादा भ्रष्ट होने के नज़दीक हैं. और इसलिए इस देश में एक जन लोकपाल बिल की ज़रूरत थी, जो आज तक नहीं बन पाया, कि ऊपर सरकार से भी इंडिपेंडेंट होकर के कोई एक ऐसा बिल चाहिए.
NDTV's cricket app, Android and iPhone. Fastest scorecard, special analysis, and much more. Download free. ndtv.com/apps.